All Nations Memphis. It is an honor and a privilege to be here with you today on what is a very special day, being Father's Day 2020. I am honored to be in the seat, standing in place for your pastors, Apostles Brandon and Christabel Black, and I consider it a great privilege to be able to share with you again and give you all what I think is what heaven is saying on this Father's Day. So I don't take it lightly. I love y'all. I honor you. I look forward to being with you all in person again one day soon. But y'all may be sick of me. Y'all have heard me quite a bit over the course of the last 6 weeks. Y'all going to hear me a couple different times, couple different ways today. So happy Father's Day to every father in Memphis. I pray God's best and God's speed, God's blessing to you, and the grace of God on what it is you're called to be as a father. And I pray that something that we're going to say today is able to translate to both husbands, wives, children, the whole 9 yards. I'm going to give y'all a whole family message, but really place emphasis on the role of the father. Go to Genesis 22 with me real quick. Let's go to Genesis 22. Let me just reset one thing here. Genesis 22. I'm going to start reading at verse 1 from the Amplified Version. I'm going to read several verses here. And as I read these verses, you'll be able to see, hopefully, how I'm going to be able to put this in context. Here it is for Father's Day. It says this: Now after these things, God tested the faith and commitment of Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he answered very clearly, Here I am. God said, Take now your son, your only son of promise, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains, which I shall tell you. So Abraham got up early in the morning, he saddled his donkey, and he took 2 of his young men with him and his son Isaac, and he split the wood for the burnt offering, and then he got up and went to the place of which God had told him. On the 3rd day of travel, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. Abraham said to his servants, Settle down and stay here with the donkey. The young man and I will go over and worship God, and we will come back to you. Then Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering. He laid it on the shoulder of Isaac his son, and he took the fire and the fire pot in his own hand and the sacrificial knife. And the 2 of them walked on together. And Isaac said to Abraham, My father, and he said, Here I am, my son. Isaac said, Look, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham said, My son, God will provide for himself a lamb for the burnt offering. So the 2 walked on together. And when they came to the place, I'm almost done. When they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built an altar there. He arranged the wood. He bound Isaac his son and placed him on the altar on top of the wood. Abraham reached out his hand. He took the knife to kill his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. He answered, Here I am. The Lord said, Do not reach out with the knife in your hand against the boy, and do nothing to harm him. For now I know that you fear God with reverence and profound respect, since you have not withheld from me your son, your only son of promise. Then Abraham looked and glanced around, and behold, behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by its horns. And Abraham went, he took the ram, offered it on the burnt offering, and instead of his son. So Abraham named that place, The Lord Will Provide. And it is said to this day, On the mountain of the Lord it will be seen and provided. And this morning, just for a few moments on this Father's Day, I want to talk to you from a thing thematically, and I'm just going to say, it's all I got. I want you to just go ahead and type that in the comments, especially the fathers that are watching and tuned in this morning. Just type, it's all I got. And I'm going to make that all make sense in a matter of moments, that it's all that I have. But all that I have, I'm willing to give back to the God that has given me more than I could have ever dreamed of and or expected. It's all that I have. But though I don't have much, I'm willing to put it all on the altar and give it back to the one who gave it to me in the first place. Right now in America, right now in the world as a whole, there is a crisis, just as it has been, or just as it was early on from the book of Genesis all the way through the book of Revelation. There has been and always will be an attack on fathers. There will be an attack on seed carriers and the one that has the ability to give and produce the seed that changes life. I know we love our mothers and we celebrate mothers on Mother's Day with great reason and great cause. They are the womb, the portal by which we come into the earth. They are the ones that carry and nurture and prepare us for a life before we even cry our first tear. And I love mothers and Mother's Day more than anybody else. I think it's a significant day. It's a significant holiday. It's a significant moment for us to reflect on the ones that carried us to the place where we are right now. But even more than celebrating Mother's Day, I think that we can't forget the significance of fathers. And there is no womb without a seed. The entire room that the entire reason that the womb becomes full is that there's a seed that hits it and makes something suddenly spring forth to life. Ultimately, what I'm saying is without a seed, there is no space for a womb to ever carry life into the earth. So hell's attack has always been and will always be on the male seed. Hell will do anything possible to cut off the power and the strength of the seed. You watched it happen with Pharaoh in the Old Testament. You watched it happen even in Jesus' day, that every young boy 2 years and under was killed by the sword, because hell's attack will always be to silence the seed. What I'm grateful for is that God is raising a remnant of men that have made up their mind, no matter what transpires in the earth and or around it, my seed will not be silenced. God has given me far too much, and he's brought me far too long in this journey to downplay what it is that I carry. Matter of fact, some of you men ought to prophesy right now that everything that's coming out of me is going to produce an abundant harvest far greater than anything I've already seen in the earth. Why? Because I carry good seed. Everything, every place I'm called to produce and reproduce, it causes harvest to spring forth in the earth. As a matter of fact, can you just take a moment before I go any further in this message, and this is not even the turn where I wanted to take it. I want every father to take about 15-30 seconds, and I want you to prophesy over your sons and your daughters, and I want you to make a quick declaration. You can even put it in the chat that your children are going to exceed and excel everything that you've already set your hands to do. Even the single men that are waiting to be fathers, I want you to prophesy to the future of everything that's locked in your loins. Make a declaration that my seed is going to change the life and the lives of everything that it comes into contact with. As a matter of fact, today, use the authority of your words and your language and your prophetic unction to make a declaration that my seed won't understand poverty, my seed won't understand lack, my seed won't ever understand being misunderstood by those they were not called and or assigned to. My seed is going to exceed and excel everything I was called and created to do. Why? Because if God gave me the authority and the power to release life and seed in the earth, I'm already declaring the life that I release is going to excel and exceed that which I have done. We are not giving birth to lackluster seeds, but everything that comes out of us has been ordained and called to make a difference and change the world. So here we are, Abram called out of his father's house in a moment where he had just lost his father and could have easily reached a comfort zone. And the Lord told him, I want you to go to a place that I'm not going to name for you yet. I just want you to start walking, and everywhere that your foot treads, I'm going to give it unto your seed and into your inheritance. Abram had to make a decision in a moment. Am I going to stay and continue to reside in a comfort zone, or am I going to boldly go and explore and apostolically begin to blaze a trail for generations that I've yet to meet? And very often, the dichotomy that men have to live in, the space that we have to find ourselves breaking out of, the comfort zone that we often don't know how to communicate as strongly as we should, is being grounded and stayed faithful in what has been, and then being able to establish something that we have not seen yet. I don't care how old a father is. I don't care how long a man has lived. He will tell you that there has been an internal wrestling between, should I stay put because at least here I know what to expect, or should I make a journey into parts unknown, and though I don't know what the outcome has been, I still am willing to take a journey. Here is the first prophetic affirmation I'm giving to every father, and I'm not just going to give it to fathers, I'm going to give it to everyone that's listening and tuned in this moment. Don't allow stability to compromise your future because you're comfortable. I declare over you today, if you have heard God whisper to you to move beyond what you've done into a realm and a sphere that you have not touched yet, today is your moment to shake yourself out of your comfort zone and begin to do what you heard God say the first time. You're waiting for another set of instructions when you haven't followed the first set, but I'm crazy enough to believe that this is about to be a moment where God allows you to break the shell off of your comfortability. You're about to break the ceiling off of what has been, and you're about to journey into a space and into a place that you have not seen prior to this day. Abraham makes a journey with his wife, and you all know the story. He goes through several spaces and areas where God will speak to him, and then God will go silent. God will speak, and then God will go silent. God will speak, and then God will go silent. We're not talking about a couple of weeks of silence, a couple of days of silence. There in Scripture seems to be huge chunks of years, at some point even over a decade, where Abram doesn't hear from God. And what we've learned is this: we know this in our current context and reality, that there are moments where our attention span becomes so short that when we don't feel like we hear God clearly, we have to respond in what we think is best. And we create Ishmaels out of seasons of being unsure of what it is God is trying to do. We begin to listen to the counsel of those that we love, and we bypass what God has already promised. In one moment, in one season, Abram fooled around, slept with Hagar, birthed an Ishmael, and God still had to bless him because it came out of his loins. Listen, even when it didn't happen the way you thought it was supposed to happen, here's your word, fathers, even when it didn't happen the way that you thought, the way that you dreamed, the way you desired to come, here is your affirmation: God still gonna bless it. Even when it didn't happen on your timeline, even when it didn't happen with who you wanted it to happen with, even in what you thought was a great or a grave mistake, the blessing of the Lord is this: I'm still gonna bless him. You ought to just go ahead and hit your heart so that your heart can heal from the injuries of yesterday's mistakes. Then you need to declare over yourself, God is still gonna bless this thing. I know it didn't turn out the way that I thought it would, and I know it didn't happen the way that I added it up to, but God is still gonna bless this thing. Here is your word. Here's part I ain't got to my text yet, but here's your word. God is still the type of God that can take your mistakes and turn your greatest mistakes into your greatest blessing. He can take a moment when you thought was your greatest failure, a moment when you thought it was your greatest flaw, and he can flip that thing around and make it still turn out to be the thing that changes the course of life and history. God still blesses Ishmael. He does not allow Ishmael to leave the house without a blessing. He said, because he's your seed, it's your seed that's blessed. Regardless of the vehicle that got it here, I still got a blessing. So now Abram, about to be 100, Sarah, 90 years old, Isaac comes. God allows finally Sarah's womb to open and respond to the authority of the seed of her husband. Abram, as a husband, as a father, as a fixer, has prayed for over 30 years for this moment to happen. And then finally, in the fullness of time, God allows the womb of Sarah to open up to receive the authority of Abraham's seed and to receive what is about to be a world changer birth out of her canal. Now here's the thing. There are spaces with men when we can't fix it, we will search and find an alternative to try to make it work. But there are also spaces where God won't let us fix what we thought we could fix. And it has to happen in the fullness of time. Here's the next word for every man and every father. There are some things you're not going to have the authority to fix. I know in you want to be the solutionist to every problem, and you want to be the one that can put the pieces of the puzzle together for everybody else. But here's the thing. There are going to be certain things that your humanity does not have the strength and or the wherewithal to pull together and to make it happen. The truth of the matter is, if we are the ultimate fixers, we don't need God. But there is a place where your humanity cuts off and the supernatural strength of Holy Ghost has to come upon you to reveal how God is going to fix it on the other side of this. You are not the ultimate solution and the ultimate problem solver. He is. And there's certain things that only God can do with your cooperation and with, in the earth, your permission. So now we fast forward ahead. I've said a lot in the 10-minute introduction. Let me get you to Genesis 22. Now when we open up the corridors, the canals of the 22nd chapter of the book of Genesis, something very interesting has happened. At this crossroads, Abraham and Sarah have now enjoyed the luxury of sonship for several years. Historians would say here at this point, we're not talking about a baby Isaac. We're not talking about a toddler Isaac. We're not even talking about a preteen Isaac. This is a young man who has grown in stature. He has grown in maturity. He is now able-bodied enough to be able to help his father with the chores and the task around the house. He is now able-bodied enough to where he is able to run in and kiss his mother in between his chores and go ahead and communicate how much he loves her. We're not talking about a baby that's goo-gooing and gaga. We're talking about a young man that is becoming a full-grown one. And at the corridors of Isaac, being a full-grown man, God sends a word to Abram and to Abraham, and God sends his word to begin to test the strength of Abraham's faith in him in a moment that could be the most critical crossroad of his life. And what he does to Abraham is this. He says, now I want you to take your son, your only son, Isaac. It's very interesting to me that God gets very specific in this moment. And he tells Abraham exactly what it is that he wants. Because if God had left it blanket and said your son and not put definitive pieces that he actually desired on it, Abraham would have went and found Ishmael and put Ishmael on an altar. God did not want the alternative, he wanted the real. Now, here's the thing. You and I cannot find ourselves as fathers in places where we are offering alternative sacrifices. There will be moments where God makes very specific instructions and your demands and your calls on what it is he's built us for. There'll be things that he asks for that seem like they are the most painful for us to offer up. That is not the moment for us to attempt to contend with heaven and offer heaven an alternative solution. There is a place in the will of God where we bow in humble submission, even when we don't like it, and even when it's the hardest thing we've ever had to do in our lives. We find ourselves like Jesus saying, not my will, but your will be done. I don't know who this is for, but I believe that there are a couple of fathers that even as we have went through the first half of this year, that you have found God asking you for a hard thing. You have found God asking you and requiring you to do something that seems beyond your reach and your reason. You have found God pleading with you for a sacrifice. And some of this may not be even a sacrifice of sons or daughters. It may be a sacrifice of your time. It may be a sacrificing of a new normal. It may be sacrificing of a new dynamic in your workspace or in your environment. And God has begun to ask and plead with you for what is a supernatural. It feels like a supernatural ask. It feels like God finally gave you a little bit of peace. And now on the other side of that peace, it feels as if he's pulling the rug from up under your feet and everything feels like it's going haywire. Here is my word for you. You don't have to understand it when you get the word. All you got to do is submit to it. God is going to ask you to do some things that in your normal reasoning and intellect, they don't make any sense at all. It does not have to make sense to your day, to your today, for it to be a God-sent word. Just because it doesn't make sense does not mean it's not God. There are moments where God asks you to put your greatest thing on the altar, and he does it to see what you love or who you love more, him or it. God asked for Isaac, and he's very specific. He says, I want you to give me Isaac. I want you to bring him to Moriah, and I'm going to show you which mountain I want you to sacrifice him on. This is the only place in the entire conversation where it gets a little bit familiar to Abraham, because Abraham remembers when he first started this journey with God, that God gave him vague pictures, but he was never specific. And even now, he paints for Abraham a very vague picture. I'm going to tell you where to go. I'm going to tell you where to make the sacrifice, but I need you to get up out of your house and make it happen quicker than what you may seem like it should happen. He did not give Sarah a lot of time to have a bon voyage party. He didn't even explain in totality to Sarah what it is that God had asked for. Because listen to me, as fathers and as men, there are moments where we try to cover, to protect, so that those that are around us are not as affected as much in a moment if we have the ability to protect and or shield them from it. What Abraham does is he gets Isaac, he tells Sarah we're going to worship, because he knows good and well, and he told that woman that I am going to kill your son. Now, Sarah would have killed him in his sleep. Y'all know, let me just talk to the brothers. Y'all know good and doggone well that if your husband came and said, hey, tomorrow I'm going to kill our kid, then y'all know good and doggone well he would have died in the bed in the middle of the night. Y'all got to say amen. If you're a woman in the chat and you know I'm telling the doggone truth, I just want you to throw your hand up. Just throw your hand up. You know good and well the man wouldn't have made it through the night. You can kill anything, but you ain't gonna take my son. After I done waited all these years, 90 years for this old wrinkled womb to open up, and you telling me you're going to kill him now? The devil is a doggone lie. You would have called your husband a demon. You would have said he ain't heard from God. And that's why, listen to me, there are certain things that husbands hide in their heart. There are certain truths that we feel like we hear from God that we can't speak it as soon as we hear it. We've got to be able to get and unpack the understanding of what it is that God is saying to us for the family as a whole. Now, let me just speed ahead of this. Verse 3, it says that Abraham got up early the next morning. I need somebody to just shout early. And I'm going to tell you what the implications of that are and what it really looks like. What Abraham says is this: I cannot waste time. Now listen, this is all that I've got. Isaac is the heir. He is the one that's going to run with the word that God gave me when I started this journey over 3-4 decades ago. He is all that I've got. But in this moment, if God is asking for all that I have, I don't have a moment to delay and drag my feet on what the promise keeper is asking me to offer. Here is your word. You cannot have delayed obedience and still stand in the will of God. You cannot take a moment to attempt to contaminate and or compromise the promise or the word of God to try to put it in your human conscience and reason and intellect and try to dumb or water down the word that you got. The way that you have to respond when you got a word from heaven is you got to do it quick. I mean quick. You don't have time to get other opinions. You don't have time to wonder if this was God or if I missed him. When you got a peace from God with something pertaining to your house, you got to move, and you got to move quick. And I want to declare real quick, I don't know who I'm about to break this off of, but the spirit of delayed obedience, dragging your feet, slothfulness, may God break it off of you forever and everything in your bloodline. You're going to learn how to respond, and you're going to respond quicker than you've ever responded before. God's going to teach you how to move in excellence and to move in swiftness and be submitted as you do it. Because the beauty of this entire text is even though Abraham had a will, he was submitted to one higher than him. And the beauty of us being fathers is this. Yes, we have to make decisions, and yes, we have to make choices, and yes, we have to navigate through the pitfalls which are life. But in the midst of that, though I've got a will, I'm a submitted man to a will that's bigger and greater than mine. I have learned, even in moments when I did not want to do it, when I submitted to the hand of God, there was always a wisdom on the other side of it that I would not have extracted had I done it my own way. He gets up early in the morning. He gets his little crew together. He takes a small group. Because here's the thing, there are difficult days that you're called to walk that you cannot carry too many with you. Though Abraham is now a rich man with many servants and many what we would call sons, men and women that are serving in his vineyard, he only selects a couple. He only takes enough of what's needed for a 3-day journey. He does not carry everybody because everybody will not understand the complexities of the season. He does not take everybody because if they get in conversation, they're going to try to talk him out of what he felt like he heard from God. He doesn't take everybody, and as a matter of fact, even in the walk, he hides it in his heart. So we're walking out, and conversation is minimal about what we're really going to do. As a matter of fact, when we get to the mountain, the way I address the mountain is this: you stay here with the donkeys. My son and I, we are going up higher to worship, and we both are going to come back to you. Now, here is the beauty, the next part of the beauty of this text. When you know it's all you got to learn how to prophesy over it, even when you can't see and or feel the outcome that's about to come. I need you all just real quick. There's a little blue emoji with just a shouting mouth. I need you to drop it in the chat, because what God is about to give you the ability to do is prophesy in a hard place the outcome that you're expecting and believing God to give to you on the other side of it. I know the word that you got makes it seem as if God's going to do it one way, but here was Abraham's faith. If I kill my son on the mountain before I come back down, God's going to resurrect him. If I give him to God here, I've got enough faith to believe that before I have to meet these men again, Isaac is still going to be walking with me. The beauty of the text is this: when you are a father filled with faith, there is something powerful that activates when you open up your mouth and you begin to declare what the Lord is doing in the midst and in the middle of a thing. Abraham says, listen, y'all do what you want to, but y'all stay right here. Me and Isaac are going up a little bit higher. And the beauty of the text is this: whenever God calls you to take a journey as men to go higher, it is never to kill who it is he's built you to be. It's to offer to you a perspective of him that you have not seen before. I'm trying not to go all the way here, but every time Moses went into the mount of God, he came out with a different revelation. Every time Moses went higher into the tabernacle with him and God, he came out and his face would glow and radiate in a way that it had not before. So much so that he had to veil himself when he came into the presence of the people. Why? Because anytime God calls me to ascend, he's calling me to a spot and a place of revelation in him, in the mount of God that I did not have before. What if I told you God in this season is calling you higher, not to kill you, but to revelate you? He wants to show you a side of him that you have not been exposed to. You have watched the God that walked with you in fire. You have watched the God that walked with you in valleys. You have watched the God that have allowed you to survive attack, hail, and high water. But there is a side of him that he has not revelated into your future yet. And the only way you're going to see it then is when you make a decision to ascend into the hill of the Lord. Though I am a full New Testament grace man, I still believe that there is something powerful and potent in the ascent of the Lord. That when I go higher in him, there is something in my climb that gives me revelation, understanding, and insight that I did not have in the last season. Now, let me just journey through this text. I got about 5 minutes, and I got to wrap and put a pretty big bow on this. Isaac is walking with Abraham. Now watch, what God does is he allows Abraham to put the wood on the back of his son. Why is that significant? In a moment where it looks as if Abraham is carrying the lesser part of the sacrifice, he puts part of the burden on his son. Because when God gives you revelation, you are responsible now for allowing your sons to carry part of the burden. I'm talking to the Superman in you that feels as if you've got to be the one to answer, to solve, and be the solution for everything that transpires in the earth and in your family. That God will send you and allow you to raise up sons so that you don't have to bear this burden alone. I want to declare this real quick. I don't know why this is coming up, but I declare premature heart failure, aneurysms, they're not going to drive you crazy, and they're not going to allow your life to be cut off prematurely because you're trying to bear the burden alone. God is raising sons and daughters that'll be willing to help you carry part of what you're called to. You're not called to do it yourself. You're not called to shoulder it alone, but God is sending you the ones that will help carry what it is you were created for. They're on a journey. Isaac is carrying the wood, and he asks his daddy, what in the world is going on? I see the wood, I see the fire, but I don't see the sacrifice. And in a moment where Abraham has already got the revelation from God, but what's supposed to happen, what he tells Isaac is not what God told him. What he tells Isaac is this: God will provide himself a sacrifice. The beauty of it is, even as Isaac is carrying the tools and the instrument that is going to be used for his demise, his father's prophetic word is, I don't know what God's going to do, and I don't know how God's going to do it. But one thing I do know is this: when we get to the top of this mountain, the Lord will provide himself a sacrifice for this altar. Now, I don't want to get into the whole Christology of this text. I don't want to take a journey deep into how this parallels in Old and New Testament doctrine. I really want to build the fathers, but I would be remiss if I did not take a moment to paint the beautiful picture of the submitted son to the will and the voice of the Father, allowing himself to be placed upon the wood, bound upon the wood, and ready for his life to be sacrificed. I don't want to take too much time and really dig into the fact that Isaac was a type of Jesus who was submitted to the will of his father and willing to do whatever was necessary to make the will of the Father come to pass. Where I really want to land and where I want to tie all this up is right here. Abraham puts Isaac on the altar. Abraham raises the knife to kill his only son. And right at the last moment, right at what seems like the midnight hour, right in a moment where you feel as if God don't come through now, it's just not going to be done. Right before he put the sword on the son, on the one that he loves, that is his seed, he was willing and ready to sacrifice all that he had. And then he finally heard a voice echoing from heaven and saying, Abraham, Abraham, I see now that you love me more than you love what I gave you. And if you look over there in the thicket, there is already a ram that's ready for the sacrifice. In one moment, Abraham was able to get a revelation of God that he did not have before. He watched God be the one that carved out a path and allowed allowed him to walk by faith. He watched God be the one to supernaturally open up the womb. But in one moment, he watched God become provider on a level that he had not seen him before. Because Abraham wasn't willing to fix it himself, and because Abraham was willing to sacrifice all that he had, he found a ram hidden in a thicket and a revelation. He got a ram and a revelation. Hear me? He got a ram and a revelation. And the revelation is this: God is Jehovah Jireh. And every time I ascend into the mountain of God, he always sends provision. Father, many of you, even this year, even this quarter, have found yourself in crisis, job loss, wondering how you're going to be what you've always been for your family. If they only knew the silent tears that you cried, and if they only heard the tears that may never fall from your face, but drip proudly from your heart. They only knew that the moments that you wondered, God, how, when, where, and the moment when you don't have any of the answers, and the moment you don't have any of the solutions. The beauty is, when you're willing to give him all you've got, you'll discover all that he's got. God has resources that your life has not touched yet. God has strength that you've never met. God has places and levels of impartation of not just his wisdom and his will, but of heaven's abundance, even when you're at the most difficult crossroads. I will never forget, we're going to wrap this up. I'll never forget the tears that I cried as Nika carried Amana just months after we had given birth in London. Ashriel, 6 years old. And as a father, being in a place where I'm about to be the father of 3, husband of 1, making less than $30,000 a year, no clue how can we provide for you. I remember my pride saying, I can't say Section 8. I refuse to allow the government to assist me. This is my job. This is what I'm supposed to do. I'm the fixer. I'm the one that's supposed to make it happen. Then discover that in that same year, losing the only means of income that I had to be stability for my family. There were moments where I said, God, I've literally served you all my life. Yet in serving you all my life, I feel like every time my outcome is nothing. And right when I was about to lose heart, God would always send the ram. When I gave him all that I had, he sent me all that I needed. When I was willing to surrender what it was that I had in my private life and private altar, he was in turn willing to send me all that I needed for that season. Never lived lavishly. We never lived extravagantly. But what I learned was, in every season, God is going to meet our needs. He is going to ensure that we don't live beneath the God who is the need meter. Fathers, there are many of you today that feel as if you could do a better job and feel as if you have not done enough on this journey of not just marriage, but this journey of covering lives. Today, I want to give you probably the strongest affirmation that I can. You've come much further than you've given yourself credit for. No, everything's not perfect. And everything may not be what you see and or feel like it should be. But it is far greater than what you thought it would be. And or you've come much further than where you began. May you stop being so hard and so critical on the steps that you've missed and start to realize the beauty of the journey and how far you've come. This Father's Day, take yourself off the hot seat and honor yourself through the grace of God for this place in the journey that you've come. I want to pray for you very quickly. Father, I thank you for every man who sits in the space of being a father and has the call and the responsibility of navigating the days and the doors of his children. I pray today that you give him the beautiful revelation that he is a man after your own heart, that you called him for such a time as this. And for every life you've allowed him to bring forth in the earth, you've got a plan for him. I pray that you would open up the prophetic declarations of fathers, that fathers, even as they did in their days of old, would declare the blessing of the Lord, even at a young age, over their children and their seed. And I declare that faith is arising in fathers to see that they have been built to change the world. You will be the one that they declare, my daddy changed the world. And for that, we give you glory and honor forever. In Jesus' name, amen. Guys, I love y'all. I thank you for rocking with me for half an hour today. I pray something that was said has strengthened, encouraged, built your heart, built your life. And I pray that in the days to come, you see that God graced you to be a father, and what you carry is needed. I love y'all. I'll see you soon.